Hey everybody, Chef Scott here. Welcome to the channel. I am glad you're here today because we have a really classic recipe for you. It is the lemon tart, the tart citron in France. We're gonna be making a sweet dough for the crust. We're gonna fill it with lemon cream and we're gonna top everything off with a baked meringue. Just to add a little flavor variation, I'm gonna be adding fresh ginger to that meringue. Now you can find a full printable recipe in the description below, as well as any special tools that I'm using today. And if you'd like to jump to the method, you can do that right now. But this week's recipe notes are about the meringue, which can be a little bit tricky. So I've got some good tips for you there. Stick around and let's get started. The most important notes for today's recipe have to do with the meringue. This meringue is a French meringue, which means simply egg whites and sugar whipped together. Now this is actually the most delicate variety of meringue because there's no heat involved, so we don't have any protein coagulation. That means that the method is really crucial for getting this right. Now a meringue is very simple at its foundation. You have egg whites whipped up. Eggs are mostly water with some protein. And when you start to whip them, a couple things happen simultaneously. First, the tines of the whisk cut through all the proteins, elongating them. Proteins in their natural state are little tight coils, and the whisk tines help to stretch those coils out, also known as denaturing. When those proteins are stretched out, they begin to intertwine with one another and create a mesh that is the foundation of meringue. At the same time, air is being incorporated, and those air bubbles and water molecules are being encapsulated by the protein as it forms its mesh. Now at the very basics, you could whip up egg whites and create a foam, technically a meringue, but it's not going to be very stable. It'll be very light, very delicate, and will start to fall pretty quickly because that protein structure doesn't have anything to back it up. That's why we add sugar. Sugar is crucial, mostly because it's hygroscopic. It absorbs water. And all of those extra water molecules that are in a basic egg white meringue and kind of weigh everything down get sucked up into the sugar, strengthened by the sugar, and then reinforce the protein network. So here are a couple steps for creating really great French meringue. Number one, you don't want to add too much sugar too quickly in the beginning of the process. In the very beginning of a meringue, the protein hasn't had time to fully develop into a mesh. And by adding a lot of sugar at that stage, you're weighing everything down, tearing apart that mesh, and breaking down the meringue. Instead, you add a little bit of sugar in the beginning, let things start to whip and develop, and then add more progressively as the meringue develops. Another common problem when whipping meringue is whipping too quickly, too soon. When you start to whip quickly in the very beginning of the meringue, yeah, you'll develop a foam, but you're developing a foam full of tightly bound protein coils. You need to give those time to unwind and relax. So starting your meringue at a medium speed and with a little bit of sugar added is the best way to go. And then as the meringue develops, you can increase the speed and increase the rate of adding sugar. That's going to give you a really strong foundation to accept more agitation and more sugar and give you the strongest meringue possible. You also definitely want to be careful not to over whip a meringue, which in a commercial mixer is really easy to do. So I like to take my meringues about 90% of the way there and then actually finish them by hand. And how do you know that you actually have an over whipped meringue? Well, you can always tell by the texture. The moment your meringue starts to look crumbly and break apart into pieces, or you find water at the bottom of your mixing bowl, you have an overworked meringue, and unfortunately there's no real way to save it. See, what's happening is the protein network that you've created begins to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. So tight, in fact, that it pushes water molecules out, and that's why you find water at the bottom of your bowl, and starts to clump together. That's why you get a crumbled meringue. So it's really important to stop whipping once your meringue is nice and smooth, but still has those stiff peaks. In the case of this baked meringue, we're going to be adding powdered sugar, and that is extra sugar to the process, but also starch because powdered sugar contains starch. It helps keep the sugar from clumping when it's sitting in your ingredient bin. That extra starch is further going to stabilize any water molecules left over in the meringue and give it a really firm structure, firm enough to be baked in the oven. If you tried to bake an Italian meringue or a Swiss meringue, it wouldn't work out so well for you. There's too much sugar, the ratio's off, and that sugar is in a syrup form that's going to bleed out of your meringue. You also notice that there is cream of tartar in this recipe, and that's technically optional, but an important addition. Cream of tartar is acid, and acid is going to help that protein binding and give you a stronger meringue. You might also see some meringue recipes that have dried egg white powder, and really that's just a kick of extra protein. That's egg whites without water, leaving behind just the protein, and that can also help give you a nice stiff meringue. In terms of baking that meringue, low and slow is the name of the game. Even low heat is going to dry your meringue out slowly, preserving its white color, which is what we want, but also keep the sugar from bubbling up too quickly. If you've ever baked meringue and it's cracked, or you've seen little bubbles along the sides of that meringue, that means two things. One, you're baking it too hot. That creates the cracks. The little sugar bubbles on the side means that you added your sugar too late in the game and it didn't have time to fully dissolve in any of the water in the meringue. That then caramelized and creates those bubbles. So that's telling you that maybe you need to add the rest of your sugar a little earlier in your whipping process to give it all time to fully dissolve. Last and most importantly, it's crucial to understand that fat is the ultimate enemy of a meringue. You know in those action movies when the hero's trying to save someone from falling off a building or a cliff or whatever, and he reaches his hand out and they lock arms and he pulls him up? Imagine if those two hands were covered in butter. That would make for a much different movie ending. The same thing happens in your meringue if there's any residual fat in your mixing bowl or on your whisk or anything that happens to fall into the meringue itself. The protein chains get coated in that fat and can't bind together, and the meringue foam never develops. So it's crucial to make sure that all of the tools are well cleaned, not just rinsed off, because even residual fat from a previous recipe can ruin that meringue. It also means that you don't want to add any fat-based or oil-based flavorings or ingredients to the meringue while it's whipping. That is going to break everything down and make your meringue fall, never to rise again. This includes some extracts like lemon and orange oil. Lemon flavor comes from essential oils, and those oils can be enough to make your meringue fall. If you need to add zest to your meringue, which you absolutely can do, add it to the very end and understand that it's going to break the meringue down just a bit. So you want to be very gentle with that adding process, always folding by hand rather than whipping or whisking. In fact, just about any flavorings except for maybe vanilla extract and salt should be added at the end of a meringue, folding it in at the very last minute so that you're not breaking down any of that protein trying to create a mesh in the beginning of the method. Understanding how to make a proper French meringue and do it consistently is a really fundamental skill and an important one to master a whole host of other recipes. So I highly recommend taking the time and a little bit of practice to get the method down just right. Other than that, this recipe is really simple. If you've made any sort of dough at all, cookie dough, pie dough, you can handle the sweet dough for this recipe. And the lemon cream is really similar to pastry cream. If you're a little new to cooking custards, I suggest you check out my video on pastry cream first, where I explain some of the science behind that process. It's gonna help you a lot with this recipe too. But if you just wanna get started right now, that's fine. I'm gonna go through everything step by step. With that out of the way, I think we're ready to start our tart. Combine the butter, sugar, salt, and vanilla extract and mix on medium speed until combined, about 5 minutes. Add the whole egg and mix on medium speed until the mixture is smooth and emulsified. Don't worry if this takes some time to combine. Add the flour and mix until the dough is just combined. Spread the dough on plastic wrap and cover. Lightly roll the dough to even the thickness. This makes rolling much easier later on. Refrigerate the dough for a minimum of 1 hour up to overnight. Once chilled, flour the dough on both sides and roll to 1/8 inch or 3 millimeters thick. Place your tart ring over the dough and press down to punch out a disc. Save the scrap dough for the sides. Line a sheet pan with a nonstick baking mat or parchment. I'm using a black sheet pan, which is very flat. Then add your dough and the tart ring. Gently work the scrap of dough into a log and roll it to about 2 feet long. Flatten the log and roll the dough into a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter strip. Trim one edge of the strip with a straight edge. Gently roll the dough up. Place the roll of dough in the tart shell with the clean edge facing down. Unroll the dough, gently pressing it to the side of the tart ring to adhere it. Trim off the overlap of excess dough, then clean the top edge of the dough with a paring knife. Chill the raw tart shell for a minimum of 2 hours, up to overnight. Once cool, remove the tart ring, then clean the edges of the tart ring with a microplane. This step is optional, but makes a really nice finish. Combine all of the ingredients in a medium saucepot and cook while whisking over medium heat. Continue to cook until the mixture thickens, then remove from the heat and whisk for another 20 seconds. Transfer the lemon cream to a tall container and add the butter. Hand blend or whisk the butter into the lemon cream until it is fully emulsified. Pour the lemon cream into the baked tart shell, filling it completely. Save any remaining lemon cream to use later. I add a piece of plastic wrap to the top of the tart to smooth the mixture and to prevent any skin forming while the lemon cream sets. Chill the tart until the lemon cream is set. Combine the egg whites, cream of tartar, salt, and about 1/3 of the sugar. Begin whisking on medium-low speed. Allow the egg whites to whip until a full foam has developed. Add the remaining sugar in 3 or 4 stages, increasing the whipping speed with each addition. When all the sugar is added, whip on high speed until the meringue reaches stiff peaks. Add the fresh grated ginger and whisk briefly to incorporate. Add the sifted powdered sugar and gently fold it in until fully incorporated. You can simply pipe or spread your meringue on a baking mat or parchment paper, but I'm going to use a set of casting bars to create a disc with an even thickness. I'm using 1/4 inch thick bars for the first meringue disc. Prepare a cake or tart ring that fits inside the diameter of your tart shell. Cast the meringue between the 1/4 inch plastic bars, then use a scraper or straight edge to spread the meringue to the height of the bars. Remove the guides, then use a sheet pan or sheet of plexiglass to gently press into the top of the meringue just to make contact. Gently pull the pan up to create the custom texture. Press the ring into the meringue, then scrape the excess meringue from around the outside of the ring. Save that meringue too. Gently remove the tart ring, then clean the edges of the disc. Carefully place the baking mat on a flat sheet pan. Spread the remaining meringue between 1/2 inch casting bars. Repeat the method of spreading the meringue. Wipe the same cake ring clean and lightly oil the inside of the ring. Place the cake ring in the center of the meringue. Repeat the process of removing the meringue, then the ring. Carefully remove the cooled meringue from the baking mats. Clean the edges of the meringue with a microplane as needed. Cut a strip of lemon zest to use as garnish. Remove the plastic from the set tart, then place the thick disc of baked meringue onto the tart. Pipe a disc of lemon cream onto the meringue. Smooth the cream, then place the textured meringue onto the lemon cream. Garnish with more lemon cream and lemon zest. All that's left is to serve it, cut it, and the best part, eat it.